Hello, everybody. Welcome to Two Bi Guys. Happy Pride. It is June. It's Pride Month. Happy Pride, everyone. I'm so excited to celebrate Pride here in Los Angeles. Well, here in WeHo this past weekend, in Los Angeles for LA Pride next weekend, in New York in a few weeks for New York City Pride, and wherever you're celebrating Pride and whenever. Happy Pride. I wish you the best. Today is our season finale, finally, of book season. I can't believe we finally made it to the end. We stuck in another whole season in between the middle of book season. So we've really done 2 seasons back to back, or like a little sandwich, one season inside the other. So thank you for bearing with my scheduling and the timing of all that. I really love both of these seasons, both interviewing the subjects from my book, and chatting with them a year or two after we did the interviews for my book, Bisexual Married Men. And I also loved chatting with 10 other bi authors about their new bi books. And it's really amazing that we have 10 books. I mean, they're not all specifically bi, but 10 books that address these themes. And many of them are very specifically bi. And it's just great to have all this knowledge and experience sharing in the bi community. In a minute, I have an amazing interview with R.K. Russell. He's back on the show. He was here in season 2. He wrote a memoir called The Yards Between Us, and we're going to chat about it. It's an awesome interview. You don't want to miss it. And all of the interview is here today. It was a little bit of a shorter interview, so I'm just giving it to you all. No bonus content on Patreon as a finale treat. Before we get to that, a few things. First, some changes to Two Bi Guys. The first change is the new logo. You may have already seen it. I kind of soft launched it accidentally by uploading it to the feed earlier last week. And if you've seen it, you know that this show is now Two Bi Guys by One Bi Guy. So we're still called Two Bi Guys everywhere when you search for us. That's the name of the podcast. I didn't really want to change the name. I didn't want to change the brand. I loved the simplicity of it. But at the same time, I started this podcast with Alex Boyd. It was amazing to begin it with him, and I couldn't have started it without him. But he, as you all know, has moved on to a job at the Trevor Project. Hopefully he'll come visit here and there, but he's not here most of the time. And so people kept writing me messages asking both of us questions, and it's just me mostly. So I just wanted to change the name slightly to reflect that. So we are Two Bi Guys by One Bi Guy. And what I like the most is that every other word in the title is bi. The feed is the same, the social media is the same, nothing changes except the logo. And I love the new logo. It's redesigned by the same person who created our original logo, my friend Caitlin Weinman. I love the job she did with this one. It looks so different from the old logo, but of course in the spirit of the show and with the colors that we love, the bi colors and a little bit of yellow for pan. So thank you, Caitlin, for making that logo, and I hope you all enjoy the new name. Second, this is for the future. I'm not really sure how this is going to work yet, but just to tease it a little, there may be some changes to the podcast happening after the hiatus I have coming up. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. This season has been incredible interviewing bi authors, but it was quite a bit of work for me. I did have to read an entire book before every interview, and I'm glad that I did that, but I just can't necessarily do that every time. So moving forward, I am hoping to just have some more low-key conversations, not necessarily about someone's life's work, which we can certainly touch on and which will frame any conversation. But I want to just chat about stuff. I want to talk more about current events. I want to talk about bi stuff in the news and how it's impacting us as a community on an evolving basis. I want to talk about like whatever is coming up for my guests in the moment and just explore new stuff. And at the same time, I'd like to infuse some more comedy into this show. As you have probably seen on social media, I've started doing stand-up comedy. I always had been wanting to do that for many years of my life, but I was always too scared. I never felt prepared. I actually think doing this show really helped prepare me because I've always kind of known how to write jokes. I've written comedy, I've written jokes for other people, but now that I'm very comfortable talking about myself and sharing anything about myself, now I can write jokes for myself. And so it really couldn't have happened sooner. And this opportunity to talk to you guys and share stuff about myself really helped set me up to do this comedy stuff. And I'm really very much focusing on a lot of the same things that I talk about on this show, which is fluid sexuality, fluid gender, gay sex parties, and intimacy and fetish and kink, and polyamory and non monogamy, and all that kind of stuff. So stay tuned to my social media for more on the stand up. But I'm hoping to infuse that a little bit into this show. And so if you know any bi comedians, let me know, because that would be cool to do some episodes like that. I also may infuse some of my coaching into this podcast because I'm learning so much by doing that. And it feels so related to the work that I've been doing for this podcast and for my book over the past 5 years. My coaching philosophy, like, I do believe that we can create the world we want to live in, both on a societal level, which takes a lot of time and prolonged effort, but we can move that forward inch by inch, but also on an individual level. And that also takes work. But on that level, you might be closer to achieving the worldview you want than you think. Like, I do believe that we can each control ourselves in how we view what happens to us and everything around us. And your own mindset and mindfulness are a huge part of getting comfortable with your sexuality and living authentically. And I know it's not easy because of everything we've been taught, which is often extremely homophobic and biphobic, and we internalize those things. But these are things that can be unlearned, and new pathways can be wired in your brain that allow you to live a life that makes sense for you. And that's a theme of this podcast, and it's a cornerstone of my coaching practice. So hopefully, somehow, I'm not sure yet, but hopefully you'll hear more about that kind of stuff and maybe even hear some live coaching on this podcast feed in the future. But before that happens, I will be taking a hiatus for the summer. I need to enjoy my pride. I need to take a little break after basically doing 2 seasons back to back. So stay tuned. I am not exactly sure when we'll be back. Definitely not in June, maybe later in July, maybe August, sometime toward the end of the summer. In the meantime, I am still coaching on an ongoing basis, and I really loved working with my first round of clients over the past few months. We've made a ton of progress. All my clients are moving forward with whatever they came in with. You can see a few testimonials on my website if you want to hear from my clients directly. More testimonials will be coming soon because I am finishing up with a handful of clients. So I offer a 9-session package. I recommend that to really get a full view of what's going on in your life, address those things, and move forward and make some plans and progress. I'm finishing up that 9-session package with a bunch of clients who I started at the beginning with. So I have new spots available for new clients. If you are interested, head over to my website, robertbrookscohen.com. There you can book a free intro call for 25 minutes. We can talk about what's going on and decide if coaching with me would be good for you. And you can have a chance to get coached by me for a short time and see and feel what that would be like. I've already talked about how I coach in other episodes of this podcast. You can go back and listen for more if you want to hear me talk about that more. I believe it was the episode with Renee, the last episode of my book series. So about 5 episodes ago, the one that says Renee. That one has like a 20-minute explanation of my coaching philosophy and how it works. But basically, I'm going to follow you. I'm not giving advice. I'm following where you're going. And we're addressing what's blocking you and your energy around this stuff, because there can be external blocks. And those are things we can work on in sort of practical ways. But a lot of the time, maybe most of the time, people think that the external blocks are holding them back, and actually it's something internal. If you're not internally ready to move forward, there will always be external blocks. And when you are internally ready and you have addressed whatever's blocking you internally, you will find ways to deal with those external blocks. So that's the work of coaching. You can see my rates on my website. If you're ready to skip the intro call and just book a session or book the package, feel free. You can do that on my website as well. And I'm also offering group coaching. It is only $35 a session. We've been going up to 2 hours with up to 6 people. It's been going really great. Everyone who's come to my group sessions has really loved it and got a lot out of it. You get coached by me in front of other people for a short time, about 15 minutes. And then we kind of debrief and people reflect and we share. And it's really interesting for people to see other people get coached and to see people struggling with similar things and to watch them work through it. And so there's a lot of value in just coming and being present and watching other people get coached. I have been doing the coaching on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. I'm going to stick with that for now, but I may add more if we start filling up. Check my website for more details, robertbrookscohen.com. And as always, follow at 2ByGuys on Instagram for updates. Whenever I do group coaching, I will post on 2ByGuys the week before and leading up to if there are still spots available. Also, in addition to group coaching, I'm developing a workshop. For now, it will be one time, but I'm hoping we offer it again if it goes well. I'm doing a workshop called Celebrating Bi Men and Beating Minority Stress. And it's going to be me and a guy named R. Scott Boots co-hosting this workshop. It'll be about 3 hours on a Sunday. I think it will be July 14th. Don't quote me on that. When we officially launch the signups for this, we will have an official date, but I think it's going to be July 14th. It's going to be sometime in July on a Sunday. The seminar will be different from my group coaching, which is very client focused and we go wherever you want to go. At this seminar, Scott and I will both sort of do a presentation and then we'll do a lot of group work to sort of discuss it and debrief it. I will be doing a talk, basically an overview of the landscape for bi men. I will be sharing some findings and research from my book, helping participants create awareness about the challenges and opportunities that show up in the daily lives of bisexual men. We'll talk about desires, possible roadblocks, and create practical steps toward living our most authentic lives. The second half of the workshop is R. Scott Boots's Minority Stress Self-Care Wellness Seminar. It's really great. It focuses on stress management techniques for minority groups like us and how to think about that and how to approach that. He did this workshop with By Request a year or two ago, maybe both a year and 2 years ago. And it was amazing. Everyone at By Request loved this workshop and got a lot out of it. And I think it's sort of the perfect complement to what I'll be talking about. He'll go through a series of exercises to help you better understand yourself and the journey and to create healthy self-care goals. So we haven't officially launched that yet, but follow 2ByGuys, check my website, robertbrookscohen.com. All of that info will be posted as soon as we officially launch signups in the near future. I think that's it. That's all I can think of. Again, happy Pride. Remember, there's no bonus content for this episode, but you can see the full video on Patreon and bonus content for all other episodes. I'll hopefully post some bonus clips during my hiatus as well. That will be kind of fun. If there's anything else you'd like to see on Patreon that I'm not putting there, please let me know. I'd love to put some more stuff on there. Thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed on Patreon. It really means so much to me, and it is really helpful in this podcasting industry, which is very much in flux and the ad revenue goes up and down. The Patreon has been really amazing to help me keep this going. So thank you so much to all my Patreon subscribers. I love you. And now here is the season finale of book season. Enjoy my interview with the first out bi NFL player. Now he's a writer, artist, poet, R.K. Russell. Thanks for listening. Hello, everybody. Welcome to 2ByGuys. Welcome to the season finale of book season. We finally did it. We made it through my book. We made it through 10 other bi books. And I'm so excited. We have a repeat guest today back. He was here in season 2. He's back now, 4 years later. My guest today is a published author and poet, an artist, a social justice advocate, and a former professional football player in the NFL. playing with the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In August of 2019, he made history by becoming the first out active NFL player to identify as bisexual. Woo. And since then, he's written about his experience as a Black queer man in sports for the New York Times, The Guardian, the LA Times, Out Magazine, and many more places. His new-ish memoir, we're a little bit late, but his new memoir is called The Yards Between Us. It was published in 2023. And his new book, Huddle, a men's journal, is available now. Welcome back to Two Bi Guys, R.K. Russell. Hello.
Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming back. It's so good to see you again. We have to hang out in person someday since we live in the same
Right.
city.
The same city, but different cities. We've talked about this. LA is so
Yes.
spread out.
I just learned that you're like over an hour away from me. So like, do we really live in the same city? Does
It's
that
long
count? I don't know.
distance.
But I also read in your book that you during the pandemic you went on the Wisdom Tree hike behind the Hollywood sign, Griffith Park, a lot, which is I live right over there. I do that hike all the time, and I get why you like that hike.
Definitely.
Someday we'll do a hike together. So welcome back. I want to get right to it and get into your book because I loved your book. I read the whole thing, and we don't have too much time today. So last time you were here was August 2020. You were just starting to
hmm
write and pitch that book, and I remember you had mentioned that you wanted to write a memoir. So what's happened since then? Like, what was the process of the book like, and what did you learn about yourself as you wrote it?
I mean, geez, 2020. I'm like, I was just a little baby bisexual at that point. I was like a year out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the dream of wanting to write a book was so romanticized in my mind and so glamorous. And I mean, it is those things, but it was also one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And that's coming from someone who played multiple years in the NFL. It was a labor of love. It was both excruciating and extremely rewarding. I think to be able to take a step back from your life and look at it in this very um, intimate and reflective and in deep an honest way is something that I want or I hope for everyone. It's very rare, especially as men, that we really stop to reflect on our traumas, on our past, on our relationships that we've had with other people and with ourselves,
Mhm.
especially as a bi person who lives in a heteronormative world or society, who has compartmentalized so many parts of his own life and experience. It was so healing to see it all as a whole in this one piece of work. I realized that even in outside of just my dating life, even with personal life and work, I've separated so many parts of myself. And this
Mm.
book physically made me put them all together and see me as one whole person. Uh, so it was extremely healing. And
Mm.
there's days when you get up and you don't want to write, and there's days where you stay up and you can't stop writing, where it
Uh-huh.
becomes kind of a compulsion. But it's all in all, I think, is one of the greatest accomplishments in my life as well. And I want to write another book. I have continued to want to write books, so it has not scared me off. Anyone that has a desire to write a book, I say go for it. It will only make you a better person and have a better understanding and relationship with yourself, which I think we all could use.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that, and I'm glad to hear all that. And I know what you mean. The writing the book is like, oh my god, it's a years long process. You don't even
Mhm.
realize like how much time it actually takes to sit down and do it, and then revise it, and then revise it again.
Yes. Oh God.
But what you're saying makes so much sense because I found it to be quite an easy read in the sense that you're so direct and you're so like open and vulnerable that it's just a page turner. Like it really is so clear. And so whatever work you did to
Mhm.
get that clarity and write it so simply, you're not obfuscating, you're not hiding things.
Thank
And
you.
so I really liked the style of it. It's just
Thank
very,
you,
very
which I
direct.
appreciate. Which is also that's also like a whole nother thing that's kind of jarring as a writer. Like you said, we spend years sometimes writing books, and then
Mhm.
like I put this book out in May 16, 2023. May 17th, people were DMing or messaging or commenting me, just finished, couldn't put it down. I'm like, it took
Wow.
me a year to write this, and you read it in a day. I'm like, really? Like, it's the biggest compliment, but I'm also like, wow,
Yeah, right.
it's done.
That's amazing, but it's also like you could take a little more time and
Yeah,
digest it a
I'm,
little more.
I'm like, I don't know. Read it again. I don't know. They're like, when's the next book? I'm like, okay, this is why. But no, thank you. I do appreciate that.
That's funny. That's funny. Actually, I wanted to ask you, and I want to get to that idea of bringing all the parts of yourself together. That's like the big theme I noticed that I loved. But before that, you mentioned the response. Like, what we talked last time. It was about a year after you came out very publicly in this ESPN article, first by football player. Now we're about a year out from when you published this book. We're a
Mhm.
little late, but better late than never. What has the overall response been? And like, you really let people in an even bigger way than just saying you're bi. You let them into all this, a lot of other stuff and personal stories and trauma and healing. What's it been like to share that, and how has the response felt?
The response, I mean, has been so amazing and so welcoming for me, which was kind of the same thing with coming out. I mean, people really have gotten to know me on a deeper level, and I've in my experience, when you allow people to know you, you allow people to love and support you. When you now allow people to know you deeply, you allow for them to care for you deeply. And that's kind of what has happened with me and my story. It's
Mm,
also going beyond like the headline, right? Like so many times in the limited representation that we have for queer people, for people of color, for women, the affirmation or the coming out or the grandstand is like the ending. I even felt that
yeah.
with my coming out. It was like I came out and it was like you did the thing, and okay, it's over. And that's not the case. A lot of it doing the thing, yeah, there's a process to get there, but that's like the beginning. There's beauty in telling the process, which is this book, and there's also so much work to be done after, which is still the life I'm pursuing now. And it's important to humanize these topics. It's important to see people beyond the headlines, and I think books allow you to represent people that are underrepresented and allow people that don't look like you or know your experience to kind of have that olive branch and have that experience. You might be
Mhm,
tweeting about something that you don't have the experience of, and this allows you to come at that with more empathy. It's no longer
mhm,
just a talking point. It's you see it as a person, a heartbeat, something that lives and breathes and bleeds. And that's something I think as a society we could all use more of is
mm,
empathy. So the response has been great.
yeah.
That's kind of like all the little things. My book has also been optioned by Sony Pictures and Gabrielle Union to be turned into a TV show. So that's kind
Hey.
of I say go beyond the headlines. I'm like that's kind of like the big headline of
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah.
And I'm excited. I'm excited to take this story and bring it to a different medium and continue to be a storyteller. I'm co-executive producing with Gabrielle Union,
Yeah.
co-writing, so I also get to write more and in different forms. So the book continues to change my life. The more that I share, the more my life continues to grow, and that's just been awesome for me. It's been amazing.
Cool. That's so awesome. Yeah, I love the second act for you, or second out of many. And like I had heard that news about the it getting picked up
Mhm.
for development, and as I'm reading it I'm like, yeah, I could see this as a series. Like there's so many vivid scenes, and I don't know how you're going to write it, but I can imagine it jumping back and forth to the childhood stuff and then the NFL stuff. If you need ideas, let me know. Uh, but that the thing about coming out, let's talk about that, because it
Mhm.
also makes a lot of sense, and I like the way you phrased it, like it's allowing people to know you and love you
Mhm.
deeper. And I think what before we've come out, it often feels like this burden on us that we have to overcome, and we don't often think about the positive effects and the joy on the other
Yeah.
side, and the gift it is that you're
Mhm.
giving to other people. And so I have a lot of quotes from your book that I want to, I'll just share a few of them. But I liked how you wrote about coming out, and you wrote the process of living my truth was gradual. And you wrote about sort of practicing by coming out to strangers or coming out on a date here and there as bisexual. And that you wrote saying it with pride. Each exposure gave me confidence. And it's like this, I identified with that step by step process. And then what I want to ask you about is coming out to your mom, because it's such a beautiful scene. And there's a part earlier in the book where you're not ready to come out to her. And you said, you still didn't fully understand it. And so you
Mm,
weren't ready yet to share it, which makes sense. Like it's hard when you're still figuring it out.
yeah.
But then later, the ESPN article sort of set a deadline for coming out to your mom. You had to do it before she found out from the
Yeah.
press, which I was also basically my coming out story. I recorded a TV show coming out, and it was coming
Mhm.
out 6 months later. So then I had 6 months to tell everyone. So can you tell us like a little what it was like coming out to your mom, and tell us, or to other people in general? But that
Oh
story
my
was really
gosh.
beautiful.
Yes. I mean, to speak to the first half, coming out, being this gradual thing, um, I do believe as humans we are creatures of experience. The reason coming out is so hard is because before we even understand truly who we are, or really have, not even understand it, before we have the vocabulary to say we're bisexual, or to claim an identity, or to be educated about this identity, because there's very few and far resources for us as young people to be educated on it. Um, or they don't allow us those resources when we're young.
Hmm.
We have so many experiences that are innately homophobic, that are innately telling us this is wrong, you don't want to be this, that are misogynistic, that are sexist. So you already have all of those built up negative experiences. My attempt as an adult who was determined to then claim my identity with pride was to create hopefully positive experiences, to have these micro dates or experiences of claiming identity and being proud. And not every date had to be magical for it to be a positive experience, but just someone being like, oh, okay, that's cool, like what else? Like, what do you like? Tell me more about yourself. And that in and of itself, to understand that you can say the thing and still be seen as human and whole and loved and accepted, and the ground won't open you up and swallow you whole, or everyone in the restaurant isn't looking at you, and it's not this
Mm.
big scary daunting thing, that life exists beyond this fear. And like you said,
Yeah.
that there is joy and love and connection beyond that there's actually this wall that you've put up that isn't only detrimental to you, but to everyone in your life, because you're not allowing them to get to know you, or the light that shines in you is not being shined on everyone. So that was kind of my gradual attempt.
Hmm.
The coming out to my mom and setting the deadline is kind of how I was living my life back then. I very much was like collision course planning,
Yeah.
which we do the best that we can with the things that we have. So
Uh-huh.
that was going. Looking back, I'm like, okay, probably not the best, but we got there. And me and my mother, we are so close. She's my best friend. We talk every day on the phone for at least an hour, minimum. She loves me inside and out. And I wasn't a question of whether she would love me or not. I think for me, it was just, I felt almost guilt that I hadn't shared it with her earlier. It
Mhm.
it felt like, I don't know. She had done so much for me, and we had shared so much. It felt at one point irrelevant, and also at one point like I had held it so long that I had made it this thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, but it was time. And when I finally did share, it was on a phone call the day before this huge interview was about to drop. So it was also like, of course, she would go into shock. It's like you hear this big thing about the person that you're closest to in your life, that you literally held in your womb and created. Then the whole world's about to know in less than 24 hours. Then
Mhm.
so it, it was really the perfect storm. Uh, but we got there. She, I don't want to spoil things if anyone hasn't read the book yet. her initial reaction was not the greatest. It wasn't the worst. But she had concerns as a mother. I tell people all the time, at that point, I was 27. It had taken me 27 years to get to that point. I'd given my mother like 5 minutes of a phone call to try to get to that point.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
It wasn't, she wasn't going to do the 27 years of work I had done in that 5 minutes. But I will say, um, my mother did fortunately come around quickly. I'm so fortunate that we're able to show a journey that a parent cannot say the perfect thing and
Hmm.
can learn and
Yeah,
can lead with love and can come back and be stronger than ever. And I think to me that's more valuable because that's a little more real and a little more relatable for a lot of people. Of course, you would love
yeah,
to say the perfect thing, but we're not
right.
perfect people.
No, that's what I thought too, and that's what I thought was so beautiful about it was that, like, the first conversation was, like, it wasn't the worst. It wasn't like, she was saying mean things to you, but she was scared,
Yeah.
and, she was worried for you, and that's,
Hmm.
understandable, and then later, there's that conversation where she kind of basically says, like, "I'm sorry for how I reacted. I was scared," and she
Yeah.
explains it, and you have this, once you've both processed this deeper connection, which I thought was beautiful and very resonated with my story too. Like, my mom was supportive, but she was kind of sad I couldn't tell her sooner. And there was
Hmm.
that kind of rupture. And also what you said earlier about coming out to other people, like, yeah, it's cool when you come out and they're supportive or they don't care, and it's like, okay, cool. But it's also kind of helpful when you get a bad reaction and you get through it
Hmm.
and you survive and
Yeah.
you realize, okay,
Yeah.
I'm still me, and like their bad reaction is on them, and I've learned something
Yes.
about them.
Yes, it's easier when the people are kind of like a little more two dimensional in your life. And you're just
Yeah,
like, oh, okay, you're kind of like a person I wouldn't want in my life anyway. I think when
right.
it's like family or people that are so cemented, the decision isn't
It's
that
hard.
easy to just be like,
Right,
oh, okay, well, I don't really want to associate with someone like that anyway.
right,
This is like,
right,
okay, you are like a pillar in my life.
right. Then you have to have those multiple conversations
Yeah.
and really process it and help them through it sometimes.
Mhm.
But it's hard. I want to read your dedication page because it's about coming out and it's sort of a message to people. And it's like, we can't force anyone out, and it's everyone's decision. But I liked how strong this message is. I'll read it. It says, "I offer this to those still reluctant to come out. There will never be a perfect time. Only time you waste living a lie, and time you cherish living your truth. We don't know how much time we have on this earth, so cherish it." Can you tell us a little, like, why you chose to include that in the dedication page?
Of course, my story and a big catalyst for me even going on what I would say like is my coming out journey or my self discovery journey is the loss of my best friend Joe Gilliam, and I don't want anyone else's journey of self love or acceptance to come at the cost of uh, someone's life or at any really big cost. Like so much of our stories, whether it be real life stories or portrayed in media or film or books, are off the back of like egregious tragedy. And I just don't want that to be the case for us. I don't want that to be the norm for us. And if you have the power or the will or the bravery or the opportunity for that to not be your story, I really encourage you to take it. Um, I want to be the person that went through it, so you don't have to be. I think it's really important for young queer people to hear that. Like, you don't have to have the trauma story. Like, you don't have to go through the low lows to reach the high highs. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. Um,
Hmm.
and also for the people who do think, you know, who are kind of like the spreadsheet people, who are the people who are like, once I get this, this, and this, I can do this. I
Uh-huh,
wish
uh-huh.
life was worked like that. I do. Um, but it doesn't. And a lot of the times the things that you want are on the other side of the thing that you fear. A lot of times
Yeah.
the peace and the happiness and the joy and the love are on the other side of the thing that you fear and that you want to like overcome. So
Mhm.
that's kind of my message to everyone. Take
Yeah.
it as you will.
Yep.
But life is beautiful once you are truly living it for you.
Yeah, I love that, and it's definitely like sort of the big message that stuck with me at the end of it is that like that the things that we fear the most, there's so much actual power in them in confronting exactly those things, like that whatever it is that you have that fear of, actually that like it has a key that's going to
Yeah.
unlock other things that you think might be unrelated. And so you talk a lot in the book about duality and like two
Mhm.
sides of you, or more than two sides of you, and your life kind of fracturing into these different things that you kept compartmentalized. I actually want to read another quote and then ask you about this, because you have you're this like you're an artist, you're a writer, you're a poet, and then you're an NFL player, and like it's about as different worlds as you can get. And then the sexuality on top of that is like a
Mhm.
whole nother layer. So here you wrote, I was trying to be smart and articulate when I took my helmet off, but to be masculine, strong, and almost animalistic when I put it back on, but also to never let the two cross. And in dating and love, I was trying to be soft, vulnerable, and loving. And then you wrote on a different page, duality was a tricky beast. I didn't yet know that I would only feel right when I brought my two sides together. And in fact, the possibility of those two sides coming together was my worst fear. So, can you tell us, like, how did that feel before? Why was it so scary to integrate that? And how did you get there?
Oh my gosh. Before it was literally a mess. I just there's already, I think, as a person of color, so much um, information and data and observation and code switching and fight or flight and um, survival instinct that goes into just existing in this country and in this world. And when you throw on top of that identity and sexuality in sport or in Texas where I grew up, um, it felt like the perfect equation to be accepted in different arenas, different classrooms, different spaces. And I think as an athlete, there were things that were valued that weren't valued as a student, that weren't valued as just like a citizen. There were things in as growing up as like a young black man that weren't valued in other places, that actually like
Mhm.
put me in harm's way or in danger in other places. So it literally in every room that I walked into, I was calculating which parts of myself to show that would give me the best probability or chance to be accepted, loved, valued, or at the bare minimum seen as human in this space. And as a young person who has not even really figured out like who they are, this is just like a lot of constant evaluation, compartmentalization, and yeah, like self fragmenting that's happening
Mhm.
constantly. Um,
Mhm.
and it's traumatic, it's damaging. And then on the other side of it, there's times where like I'm also trying to use it to my benefit. So it's also like warping my own view of myself. There's times where like on a date, you say you're a football player, but like now I'm being a little more articulate and I'm showing off. So someone knows like, oh, he's the smart jock. Like, oh, okay, this is a little more, this is a little more attractive. Or oh, he's like a little artistic, but he's got like a rougher edge to him. Like this is a little, there's now I'm like showing off. So now I not only think that this is normal, I now think that this is like my superpower.
Mm.
Being able to kind of chameleon. And when it's your choice and when it feels natural to you and when you feel inspired to let your gifts and your personality and different talents shine, of course that's fine. But when it comes from a place of wanting to be loved and accepted and to survive, that is when this is something that's born from toxicity.
Mm.
In not being able to differentiate the two because it starts so young is what the true like crux was for me as a young
Mm.
person. So yeah, that's kind of why my initial reaction was it was a mess because
Yeah.
there was just so much going on in my head. And then at the end of the day, you have the NFL knocking on your door, and you're like, okay, I can't even figure any of this out because now I need to really just throw all of this in the closet, no pun intended, and focus on playing football.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. It makes sense. And it reminds me of another sort of topic that I wanted to talk about, which
Mhm,
is like this idea of especially by people sort of doubting themselves. And it's like a hard line to find because you need to have self-reflection and examine yourself to realize this and to come out and to accept it. But then there's also like a certain level where for bi people, especially because it's so not accepted and visible, that we can overthink and overdoubt ourselves.
mhm,
And so I saw you kind of going through that process in the book, and it's really cool to read it like as it's happening. And you talk about the healthy reflection of like starting to think about, who you're interested in and who you're dating and what kind of porn you like. And I
mhm,
liked how you wrote like, guys got turned on seeing another guy having sex even if the girl is the main attraction, and you found that you needed both actors to attract you to watch a scene, which like makes a lot of sense to me. I wonder if it makes sense to other people and they just don't want to admit it or actually
uh-huh,
reflect on it.
yeah,
And you wrote out you knew perfectly well when men are good looking. It's like, yeah, you can
mhm,
tell. But then you wrote, you start the more you're getting into this and doing it in secret. You wrote, I was good at doubting everything about my place in the world. That comes easy when you have no compassion for yourself. And
mhm,
then some, and then later you wrote, did it even matter? What if I married a woman and this was all for naught? Especially in the NFL, when there can be downsides, big downsides. You were the first
yeah.
one, so who even knows what would happen? So, can you talk a little bit about like that struggle of overthinking and how you dealt with that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, especially at that point, like being a young adult, a lot of our validation, unfortunately, like is external. Like, hopefully, you get it from like a loving home and foundation. Hopefully, you get it from like education and resources. As a bisexual person, there isn't really a lot of that, or there wasn't a lot of that when I was coming up. Like everyone that I met, straight and gay, you know, are like bisexuals don't exist. They're like that. That's like not even a thing. Um, and then I already had such a toxic relationship with myself because it was either no sense of identity or the sense of identity that I did have. I had so many reasons, so many negative reasons on both ends to not embrace my sexuality, to not embrace my race, my culture, to not embrace so many things about myself. Um, so my my own image of me was already so skewed, and then in this haze of trying to figure me out, right? There's no place that's just like, hey, it's okay to not know, and it's okay to sit in that. Everyone kind of knew, you know what I mean? Like even as much homophobic hate that I saw put on uh, gay students or gay classmates or peers, or there was kind of like this pride that I saw them carrying, like, hey, I know who I am. And you don't like it, and that's a you thing, but I know. And,
Mm.
I didn't really have that. And that's not
Hmm.
a woe is me thing. It's just a different experience.
Yeah.
And I couldn't claim that. So I mean the whole process is just so twisted. And, unfortunately for me, it's like um, seeking identity, education, and resources through porn probably like isn't the best place.
But it's what
um,
happens.
yeah,
Maybe not, but it so happens to a lot of people. That's the first. you know,
Yeah, I mean that was the
entryway.
easiest thing. I was like, men and men, like let's see what happens.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I just hope, like I said, that's why I just hope there are more stories, especially for people on all spectrums of identity,
Yeah.
and more education, because there is so many components to just figuring out who you are, not knowing who you are, and it being one okay, and two, there being just so many resources to be like, hey, you can be attracted to people of the same gender, people of different gender, people who don't adhere to any gender. I think that's a big thing about looking back at this book now too, is like even my thought process back then was like so binary, and now like I don't really adhere to a binary at all. So like that's a
Hmm.
whole different
Hmm.
thing.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and also like I get the overthinking as you're going through it, and you wrote about it really, beautifully, but it also seems like you do have that confidence now in the identity and in who you are. And maybe I know from my experience it doesn't always feel like it's fully figured out. There's always stuff to explore and uncover, but you write about it with a lot of confidence from this point now. So I love
Thank you.
that. There's a theme in the book about crying. Like it comes up a decent amount that I noticed. And I did a whole
Mm,
episode of this show with a guy who wrote a book about crying and how
mm,
our tears reveal things to us. And so I thought it was interesting. There were a few points in the book where you held back your tears, you didn't cry when you might have. You wrote that you cried at movies when you could cry at nothing else. And
mm,
maybe there's like a stigma about crying in front of people and
mm,
you don't want to be seen as weak. But when you're alone in a screen, you can. But then at a certain point, the narrative turns and you do. At Joe's funeral, you wrote you want I wanted to cry badly, but I didn't think I deserved to. But then by the end you do. And then same with coming out to your mom, there are tears there. I'm curious, like, what did you learn through your tears or through writing about them?
oh my god. I'll be honest. My relationship with crying is still probably not great.
Interesting.
um, in full transparency, I cried the other day, but I am a reluctant crier. Like it's
Mm.
just yeah, I need to work on this. But we're being honest. So
Yeah.
this is my thing currently as of today. Um, the whole process of crying, I do not enjoy. I find myself to be an ugly crier. I find the congestion of crying that instantly happens to me to be both annoying and disgusting. I instantly get a headache as well, which is terrible. And yeah, it's just I don't enjoy it at all.
Hmm.
I'm a very emotional person, like deep down. Uh, I feel like I have a very like stoic exterior, and I think I'm able to see a lot of different perspectives and be logical. But when things really hit me, they really hit me. But I try to find other ways to express my emotion without crying. I'm like, there's ways to dip my toe in and come out without fully submerging in these tears.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but I find that sometimes the experience and the cathartic like relief that comes from crying is something that is inevitable for me. Um, so yeah, I am a reluctant crier.
It's
There,
yeah.
but there are times where just you have to give in to it. It's as I get older, I find my own relationship with control, especially over myself, to be tested by tears.
Mm.
And there's so much in my life that was beyond my control, and I found myself to be the one thing that I have been able to control, and I find that to be constantly represented through my emotions and specifically my relationship with crying.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes my tears are like the one thing where they're like, you can't control us, like we're gonna like eventually we're gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
when I kind of got to be like, okay, I need to just throw my hands up and like let let my emotions and my body do what they're gonna do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the honesty and the vulnerability, and that answer makes sense. And it's like, yeah, it's like it's still a spectrum of how comfortable we are with these things, and when are we going to let it take over us versus keep ourselves in control. But I did think there were multiple points in the book where you really feel the catharsis
Mhm.
because of the crying, like, and I get what you're going through because yeah, maybe you couldn't control it anymore and it had to come out. And there's some feeling and
Mhm.
reconciliation with someone else or acceptance of
Yeah.
something that's going on that leads to the crying and those scenes are beautiful.
There also feels like there's a bit of like no meter almost to crying sometimes. Like, yeah, there's just like my logical brain. Maybe this is my overthinking. I'm like my logical brain can't really it can't compute because I'm like I cried at my best friend's funeral. Why am I crying about this? Like my mind's like these two things aren't equal,
Mm,
so don't
mhm,
cry. But my body's
yeah,
like, but we want to cry about this. Like this is affecting us. Like we want to. And my mind's like, but we should like,
yeah,
it's a bit of that. My mind is just like, I think that comes back to like, not I don't deserve to cry. I think I've moved away from that into being
uh-huh,
just like, you've been through worse than this. Like
right, right,
it's almost I don't know, maybe it's I don't want to say toxic masculinity because I feel like I've kind of stepped away from that. Maybe it's rooted in that. I don't know. Now I'm like having a therapy session. It is a bit of like you should be you should be tougher than that.
yeah,
You've handled worse than this.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's the thought that like you've built up an emotional fortitude where like crying should be reserved for this.
yeah.
And that's just not the human experience.
Right. I think that may be residual toxic masculinity stuff that you kind of mostly
Yeah.
shed, but it's still, there's still some of it because we're so ingrained with those things
Yeah.
and this being tough. And especially like it with being in the NFL, like there must be that sense of like, oh, tough, you can handle it.
Yeah.
Whatever's going on, whatever injury you have, you get out there, you play the game and like you compete. And so that's a theme in the book too of how to be
Yeah.
tough and how to get through that, but then that also sort of separates you from your real
Mhm.
feelings sometimes, and you've clearly done the work to reconnect there. But I think this, it just shows that like even with these cathartic moments, it's not like, oh, now it's easy, like now I
Yeah.
cry whenever I want. It's still like, yeah, it's still tough, and
So
it
tough.
shows you stuff that you're struggling with when that comes up. So I want to talk about like now transitioning back to the arts. And you wrote, you wrote about you had this in you your whole life, and that you had a creative side as a child. You wrote that you hid it from your teammates. Quote, I worried that a young man who wrote poetry, drew pictures, and enjoyed slow songs about love would be seen as less masculine and therefore less of a football player. But then now you wrote, which I thought was really interesting because I'm starting to like go to open mics and do some performing.
Mhm.
You wrote that you wrote about going to open mics and reading poetry. You wrote sharing poems under the dim lights with a crowd of strangers is the closest I've felt to entering a stadium and playing under the lights. It's a combination of thrill, fear, and instant connection. So I'm curious, like, what's it been like to make this transition, and how do you use your unique experience as a football player and everything you sort of learned and trained for? How do you use that as an artist?
Yeah, I love that question. There's this boldness that comes with being an athlete that you've trained your body and your mind and going out there and displaying your artistry through the movement of your body and in the force of will. And I find that very similar in artistry, in poetry, in open mics, and in sharing and performing, but in a way that to me is almost, I don't want to say braver, but just a different sacrifice. I feel like on the field, it's a sacrifice of blood and body. I feel like in these performances, it's a sacrifice of vulnerability and of heart, which for me was just so different, and so scary because it was the opposite of what I was trying to do my whole life. I was trying to hide that vulnerability and that heart.
Mm.
But football and sport as a foundation has taught me time and time again that I can exceed my own expectations, that I can break my own boundaries and barriers, and that I, at a time when I reach my limit, can move that limit again and again. Uh, there's so many positives that I've learned from sport, which is why even being a queer man in sports and even knowing all of the negatives that can come from it, I know that the sport itself has so many positives that the LGBTQ plus community, especially queer youth, can use and need specifically. That's why I don't throw the whole sport away as a whole. That's why I'm like, we just need to change the culture and get the toxic people out of the sport, because this is something that's actually really beautiful for our society and our community. Um, so with that being said, I feel like this foundation that sport gave me in really the trust in myself and the value it gave to me in me, stripping away all of the other toxic bullshit, is invaluable. And I put that in my artistry because I know that I can be bold. I know that I can be greater than just the sum of my parts, and I can exceed my own expectation. And, to be vulnerable is something that I brought into it outside of sport. And I continue to do that after coming out, whether it be writing this book, whether it be doing TV and entertainment, whether it be poetry, whether it be art, everything that I've said yes to after coming out, I either had no idea how to do, or I was completely terrified of doing, or my knee jerk reaction was no. My knee jerk reaction was to hide. My knee jerk reaction was like, people will see more of you and they might not like that. You might not be good enough. This isn't for you. You don't deserve this. So I said yes, because I know none of that is true. Because I
Right.
know that that voice is a voice that was created to lie to me.
Hmm.
And the further that I get down this road, the quieter that voice gets. The further I get down this road, the less of those things I hear. And I really do believe that that is something that sport gave me. That when my body was hurting and when everything in the world was telling me to stop, the athlete in me was like, no, do one more rep. No,
Hmm.
make one more tackle. No, do one more play. Um, so I do think the two are connected, and I do think they're
Yeah.
connected in me, and I do want to see more of that connection in the real world because I think it exists.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I love that. And it's like, I love that idea that it pushes you to just, put yourself, it's a different way of putting yourself out there because, football is like, you know what you're supposed to sort of do.
Yeah,
The play can change, but everyone knows what everyone's doing, and
yeah,
you can be the best at it. You can get better. But when you're getting on stage, it's like, who knows? There's a lot of unknowns. You might share stuff that no one expects, and you're waiting for a reaction that could go many different ways.
yeah.
Not just cheering and booing, but there's other things too, and it's scary. But I like that experience is pushing you to just sort of push yourself further and further. Yeah. Last question. You wrote at the end in that blog, I know now that I'm more than a football player and my most significant accomplishments are still ahead of me. I read that last night. I almost skipped the epilogue, but thought it's so beautiful. And you also wrote about California, that this seemed like my only chance. It was where my memories, dreams, hopes, and fantasies lived. So what do you see? And I know there's some unknowns, and there's beauty in the unknown, but like, what's your mission now? What do you see in your future? What are your fantasies or hopes for your life or career?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I life is really good. Which
Good.
like sounds so cliche to say, but there was a time, even while writing this, where I felt good, but I like didn't know where I was going. Like I had just come out. I knew I wanted to write a book. I knew I wanted to like make a difference. But like I didn't really know like how I was gonna make money. I didn't really know like how I was gonna do yeah, I didn't really have like a plan. Like I also didn't come out with like a business plan. It wasn't like a it was just like a I want to come out to be free and just figure it out. Um, but like I was saying earlier, the universe really has allowed me the opportunity to use all of my gifts and my talents and my abilities to live dreams and lives that I never thought I would. Um, so I want to continue to tell stories. I want to continue to tell stories that are underrepresented, undertold. I want to continue to platform voices that have been marginalized, that have been pushed to the wayside, that have been silenced. I want to make shows. I want to make movies. I want to create art in all mediums, in all forms, both big on big commercial scales and on small, independent, grassroots scales. I think both are very important to artistry and to storytelling. I love LA. I want to stay here for as long as it serves me. My partner and I are still together. I wrote about him in the book. He's a huge part of my coming out story. He's a huge part of my happiness. I want to start a family with him. I would love to be a father one day, which is something I never really thought about before. But
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, we could do it. 2 is like my limit. He was coming in with like 5. I was coming in with like 1. We've somehow compromised on 2. Don't do the math. It doesn't make sense, but I'm happy with it. Yeah,
Nice.
but no, I really want to continue to help people feel seen, loved, respected, and equal. All people. Because at the end of the day, whether it is racism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia, all of the isms, all of the hate, we're all fighting bigotry. We're all fighting the idea that we can treat people as less than or subhuman because of who they love or how they were born or how they look or who they believe in or the God that they choose to worship. And that is not true and that is not right. And that is what we're all fighting against. So that's the mission statement. I believe that we can do that in fun and exciting ways. And I believe we can do that in community. I believe that we can do that and still celebrate and enjoy our lives. And that is what I'm committed to.
Beautiful. I love it. Beautiful note to end on. And everyone should read the book because there's so much more about a lot of the stuff we talked about and then some and a lot of other topics that I love to talk about, but we don't have time. Do you want to there's the book, The Yards Between Us. Do you want to tell us where can people find it? And do you want to tell us a little about Huddle, your new book, and where to
All right.
find that?
Yeah, I should have that somewhere. I need all my stuff. Okay, so I mean, the art between us. This is really simple. This should be available anywhere that you buy your books. If your indie bookseller does not have it, just ask them. I'm sure they can order it. Literally available anywhere. If you have to go through Amazon, go for it. 20% off at Target, I believe, too.
Nice.
Just for anyone knows. So, the art between us, R.K. Russell. Anywhere you get your books. I just came out with a journal called the Huddle Men's Journal. This is a guided journal, 180 prompts. If you've never journaled before, this is a great place to start. It is a men's journal specifically not to exclude anyone, but to make men feel included, to encourage men to journal and to get in touch with their emotions, to begin to self reflect, to break your own boundaries, to explore your personal depths, and with hopes to understand yourself so that you communicate with others and people in your life. So, this is a collaboration that I did with Baron Fig. They're an amazing journal company and thought piece company. You can order this online at baronfig.com. The link is also in any of my socials. But this is Huddle Men's Journal. Go to baronfig.com. The Arts Between Us, anywhere you get your books. Boom.
Cool. Awesome. I'll put the links to all that in the show notes. It's so great to have like that men's journal stuff geared toward men and masculinity, and that's another huge theme in the book is about your journey with like expressing masculinity and finding your version, and so that's another thing you can read about in both books. And I love that you're doing this work. It's beautiful. We need it. And yeah, thank you again for coming back here. It's so great to talk to you again 4 years later and hear the evolution and read your book and learn all this stuff. And I can't wait till we meet in person.
Yes. We gotta go on a hike now. Now it's gotta
Yeah.
happen.
Yes. I'll see you at the Wisdom Tree.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks again for being here. This was lovely. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Two Bi Guys is produced and edited by me, Robert Brooks Cohen, and it was created by me and Alex Boyd. Our logo art is by Caitlin Weinman. Our music is by Ross Mincer. We are supported by the Gotham, and we are part of the Zencaster Creator Network. Visit patreon.com/Robert Brooks Cohen for bonus content, early access, and exclusive video episodes. Thanks for listening to Two Bi Guys.